My name is Lancia Rouse Tinsley, and welcome to another session of Art of the City, a virtual contemporary arts education program sponsored by the Center for Engaged Research and Collaborative Learning at Rice University, where we partner with Houston-based artists to provide insight into their creative process, work, and artistic journey to enhance attention and approaches to addressing the social, cultural, historical, and political dimensions of life lived in Houston. In this session, we're in conversation with Anthony Suber. Anthony is a Texas native and is a Southern-based multimedia artist and consultant. In the span of a 20-year professional studio practice, Anthony has shown work regionally and overseas. Outside of his studio practice, Suber has served almost 2 decades as a fine arts educator in Texas. He also consults with arts nonprofit organizations in Houston and is one of the co-founders of the nonprofit organization, the Black Man Project. After watching this conversation, we invite you to check out the art making prompt provided by Anthony. The prompt is informed by his own practice and hopes that it sparks your imagination and creativity and encourages you in your own exploration of contemporary social and political realities in your local context. So with no further ado, hello, Anthony. Thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lanisha. I'm so excited. As I said before you start recording, this is a great opportunity. So thank you.
Yes, and I have for a long time wanted to be in conversation with you. Been following your work. It is so dope. And you have definitely been one of the artists here in Houston who's been an influence in me just watching you from afar and how you move. And an artist that is constantly coming up in conversations with people as you move around this art community, because you have contributed a lot. And so looking forward to learning so much about your practice, what inspires your work, what you're trying to say and what you are saying, not trying, what you are saying in your work. And I think the best place to start is how long have you been making art? And what has your journey, your artistic journey been like to this moment?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. It's really, I guess, tempting as an artist, if someone will ask you a question like that, like how long have you been making art? For me, if someone were to ask me that, I guess 5 years ago, I would say, for the span of time that I've been a professional artist, but realistically as an artist, like I really, thinking as an artist and as an educator, it's been, since I was a kid. I had a really interesting conversation with some of my students that actually kind of inspired me to also have this conversation with my daughters. I have 2 little girls, about the art making process and the fact that as artists, or as people, we never lose the ability to make art. Like we all start, in pre-K, and beyond and before. And it goes one of 2 ways, right? Like, we'll either, continue on with that creative voice and continue to develop that, or we stop and we kind of get off into other things. And so for me, to answer that question, I've been making art forever, which is, I guess, 41 years. But, as a professional artist, I've been doing it for, you alluded to the fact that I've been working for over 20 years. And so, I'm an alum of HSPVA. And so my professional kind of view towards art really started early on. And, as soon as I was able to really think about, formalize ideas and really investigate what being an artist in the community was about, then I began, making it work as soon as I could.
So you went to HSPVA and then you went and got your bachelor's in art, painting or sculpture?
Yeah, my bachelor's is in painting, and and then a long awaited. I'm actually finishing with my MFA this year. I'll be graduating in like a few weeks, and so. Originally, when I got out of college, I never saw myself as someone who not necessarily that I didn't need, a master's, but it just, I was, to my point earlier, I wanted to contribute to the community, almost immediately as an artist. And I had already gone through all those years at HSPVA, and arguably, like, being at a place like HSPVA, you have this concentration that is almost equivalent to, in fact, a lot of what I did at U of H was a repeat. And this is not to bring down U of H or anything like that. I enjoyed my time there, but there was so much of it that from a practicum standpoint that was the basis of my time at HSPVA. And so I didn't really see the need for an MFA at that time. And so to I guess delve into like the idea of the evolution piece of it, when I was there at that point, my work was really about the expression of these historical stories, these narratives that I got from my family and my grandmother. And, a lot of it was informed by photography and books. Like, I did a lot of reading. I still do. I love reading. But, at that time I was absorbing so much literature that had to do with history. And so to me, it felt like I had to figure out a way to really explore that. And so a lot of the work was informed by that. And so the MFA became necessary for me as an educator, but also as an artist, because my work, and this is not, it's not necessarily true, as like when you work in the public sphere as an artist, you are beholden to like what people's opinions are of your work. And it's really hard to find that bubble for yourself to experiment and create. And almost sometimes it can be an arrested development that occurs from your practice. And so for me, there's so many things that I've gotten a chance to do in my MFA program that I could not have done, because of the arc of my career. It's very difficult. People expect for you to deliver a certain type of work, a certain visual vernacular, and it's really difficult to do that. And I don't know. I don't know if you have another question for me, or if you're ever talking about.
Keep.
There's a really interesting story with like me being going into the MFA program. I had to go, and I shared this in an interview I just did a few months ago. I had to go I was showing work at the Macedonian Museum of Contemporary Art, which was an amazing experience. So I was all the way in Greece, and I was like, oh man, this is a great opportunity. At the time my career was going in good. I had, this really successful show here in Texas, and had gotten, all these accolades and everything, and was selling work and got these really, this wonderful group of collectors. And I met who is now my mentor in the MFA program and will probably be one of my mentors going forward, Michael Collins, who's a really prolific, beautiful, like just well-known painter here in Texas. He lives in Texas, but, internationally known. We were showing work together at the museum, and he just, I met him, and I had been in Greece for 3 days or 2 days before meeting him, and I hadn't spoken to anybody. Like, I couldn't afford to take my family with me, so I was there by myself. And, when I met him, there was something about the way that he spoke of art, and something about the way that he spoke of painting as a medium, that I was just like, oh man, I really gotta, involve myself with this guy in some way. And so when we got back to, he thought I had a master's, and I kind of kept coming up, and I told him, I said, I don't have a master's, and, I just have gotten to where I am, I guess, through just work and labor and, just being very consistent. But when we got back to, to Houston, we continued our conversation, and he was at the time really, or still is, kind of instrumental in HBU developing their fine arts program. And he invited me to come to their campus, and was, just very instrumental in, basically making a way, helping me kind of see how I could be, of benefit, and, it could be a kind of a, correlation of beneficial factors, for me to be at HBU and for them to have me. And so, here I am, finishing up now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You said like your career was like picking up, or like you had great collectors, you were showing, doing all this, and then you pause to go to school. Yeah. Like,
yeah,
so are you, so I guess like I have a couple of questions that I think I'm just curious about. When you make that decision to like really focus on MFA, then are you still showing and making work for galleries, or did all of that pause? And then did you have to go through some like internal kind of conversations about that leap of like, if you did pause, like pausing and then leaping into something new, uncertain, like a lot of uncertainty about what would even come after the MFA. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
love to kind of know as much as you're willing to share about that
yeah.
part of the journey.
No, it's really interesting that you're asking me that question because yes, yes, and yes. Like I have, okay, so I'll say this. So I have had a pause before in my career. So when I got out of U of H, my career was on a really good track at that point. Like I got, I got some really fantastic opportunities to show work as a young artist. And at that time, and I'm going to correlate to your question. At that time, like I had to pause because a family member, my grandmother, got really sick, and I really didn't know I was helping take care of her. And as an artist, being so young, like, I don't know if I would necessarily call it burnout, but from a an everyday standpoint, like my just focus of work, I just lost it. And so at that time, those who of your listeners, I guess, who would know me know that I started a company called Eden Street. And I was making furniture for many years. And so I was still like painting in my studio, but I would secretly not show anybody because I was really ashamed of the fact that I wasn't making work the way that I had been before. And so I was just building furniture. And, just my focus just became that. It became something where I could, be creative and have a voice, but not necessarily be beholden to like that narrative that I had before. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a couple of years. And then to your question about now, that was my fear. Like I was really scared because it was hard. It was very difficult getting back into it. Like I felt like I had seen so much of my career almost disappear when I took that pause. Like some of the opportunities that would have been there for me beforehand, it just disappeared. And it's true for any form of expressive art, with be it music or whatever it is, visual arts. When people disappear, if you're established and you disappear, I wasn't established, I was emerging at that time, but like disappearing means your opportunities disappear, but that doesn't mean they disappear for someone else. And so there was an influx of newer artists, and I saw my peers like getting these really great opportunities. And so by the time I decided to revisit what I was doing in my career, I was like all over the place. And so, when I made the decision to do the MFA, I thought, I was just thinking like, man, I really don't want to lose the momentum of my career, to do this. But I was willing to, because what I saw in terms of the benefit was much greater than if I had stayed in the same place and just decided, well, I'm not going to do the MFA. I'm good. I'm, and I'm not, as an educator, I also see the value in continuing my education. Like I will never stop learning, and so having an opportunity, and not taking it to me was would have been a really, loss, a really great loss. So,
yeah, Anthony, nowadays it seems like there's so many different paths that one can take to get to, I don't like to say the same place, but to get to the place that you kind of imagine for yourself and for your work. And for those who are viewing this who may be considering the path of like getting the BA or the MFA, what are some maybe questions you would encourage them to kind of sit with before, or just things to think about before they take that leap and go that particular path?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, for me, it's always, it's the same thing that I would tell my students. One, always consider, what the arc of your development will look like, both entering, but then also leaving, because, in that question is also like, which program is the right fit for you? Mm-hmm. So many people make the decision to be in schools and in institutions where they don't necessarily fit. So like, for me, even as a painter, we were joking about that earlier, but even as a painter, the benefit of being at HBU was that they didn't try to hammer me down into this 2D medium. They recognized very early that I was also a sculptor, and my work can take on some of these characteristics in it, and it's okay. And so, one, obviously looking at the scope of how your work is going to evolve, but two, the benefit of it being, that you kind of to my point earlier, like you being in a situation to where you're free to do whatever you want to in terms of evolution. And so your BFA, your MFA, also, depending on the rigor of the program, you have the freedom to evolve, and you're also evolving with a cohort of other artists. So you have the benefit, which is one of the things I missed, having the benefit of having other creative minds that can see your work, and you have that critique and dialogue and that cross-pollination that allows you to evolve. And there's no, not necessarily connected to being an artist, but there's no responsibility to deliver a product, if that makes sense. And so I think that the main benefit of it is to really kind of evolve you as an artist. But side note, I would say anybody considering a BFA or MFA, which is something that we find a lot in the art world, should also do their fair amount of, it could be informal or formal, but should definitely involve themselves in some kind of business education. And the reason why I say that is because there's so many artists that receive grants and get funding, and they don't necessarily know how to handle that opportunity. And it can be detrimental to their career, but also to the people that they are expected to deliver things to. And even from the standpoint of like collectors, like, how to deal with collectors, how to deal with galleries and museums, like those things are really important. And I'll get going further to say, like, artists of color, me being a Black man, like, you really have to know how to navigate those spaces, because it's very easy for you to be taken advantage of if you walk into those conversations and you don't know, how to represent yourself and how to represent your true value and your worth. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good word. Thank you. Thank you. No, that's so true. Let's talk about your work. I want to know about it, and our viewers to know about it. So you do a lot of sculpture and painting, and we'll link to your website so people can have a visual, and there's some pictures on the page that people can see. But I want to know, like, I'm so curious about, what are you striving to say in your work? Like, what would you say is like the thesis that the questions you're bringing to the work?
No, it's, that's a great question, because I don't know. No, I'm joking.
Right.
It is so, sometimes it's so incredibly vast and sometimes so incredibly minute. There's a historical component to my work that has always been there. Like, I am the grandson of a historian, and she didn't even know it, my grandmother, who grew up in East Texas, and we have a very strong lineage to the last ancestors of mine who were slaves, who bought property there. And so every year we would journey to East Texas and go up to our property that we still own today, that my grandmother would tell us stories about, her ancestors and, everyone who put into the community, and all these things that, got passed along, which I thought was amazing. At the time, I didn't really know how rich that history actually was. And then on my dad's side, the work is informed by the practicality of my work. Like, I come from a long line of artists and sculptors, woodworkers, really. And so there's a degree to which my work is, I use this word a lot, but a reliquary. Like, it's a slice of the past. But really, for me, my work now, dealing with like the historical, became like about a narrative of me, like an African-American male living in the United States and trying to navigate circumstances that I am not welcome in, or traditionally I would not have been welcome in. And that came from kind of my personal journey, dealing with having to, camouflage oneself from microaggressions and racist behaviors that get exhibited, at people of color. And so I, about 5 to 10 years ago, really started kind of playing around. I guess it was more closer to 10 years ago, started playing around with this narrative of the African diaspora. And I started writing a narrative of a gentleman who lives in America and comes from a tribe of, and this is before Black Panther, which is crazy, but a tribe of these technologically advanced African descendants. And they will, and I'll show you, like, I have some versions of these masks, but I started creating these masks that he invented that were meant to camouflage and also put at ease the people that were in these environments, and also create like a security cocoon for the person, for the wearer. And so through choreography, these masks also react to the environment. And so to me, that this was like the symbolic representation of how we are, like, we talk about code switching and, the adverse of that is microaggression, like how Black people and people of color have to almost code switch and navigate and almost bend yourself, even through the presence of, how we navigate, not even social settings, but like leaving the door to go out and do an errand or something like that. Like we have to be mindful of the way that we are perceived and the way that we perceive our environment. And so I guess from an intellectual standpoint, like these masks, these vestments and masks, because they've evolved to like these completely wearable pieces. They are reactive, but they also they are a nod to the past, in that like when I started creating them, so I drew them and started painting them, and then I started actually creating them. They look almost like they could be from antiquity. And so I use, like my latest iteration of them, so I have one next to me, they're like ceramic and wood and leather. And then when you look at them closely, you're like, oh, it has an Arduino inside of it, and it has lights and stuff like that. And so I guess the most successful version of it was there's a mask that we made a film that Marlon Hall and myself, it was really Marlon's vision, but we used the mask as a basis of it. But it was called the Griot Gospel / Ritual Redux. And we got Harrison Guy, who's a really well-known choreographer here in Houston. He activated the mask. And so as he wore it navigating spaces, this mask has an Arduino inside of it that whenever you move and you tilt, on an X and Y axis, it creates sound and actually lights up. And depending on where you are in movement, it will actually, have a different, there's no repeating of the way that it communicates with the environment. And so, yeah, the work has really kind of gone into like this idea of wearable sculptures. And so, I've been doing that, but I also have been doing quite a few, which is, I guess.
So I'm sorry. Before you move on to the next, you said a couple of things. So one is the griot. Can you, can you tell us what a griot is?
Yeah, so griot.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so a griot is a storyteller, and I believe the etymology is it's West African, the actual title. And so griots, and so I used to call myself a griot, but like I'm really a North American griot because I'm not, West African. So the word comes from this idea of, I really think of it as like a polymath, someone who knows a great deal about society and culture, and they use that to inform history. And so, I started using that as the articulation of being a multidisciplinary artist. Like a lot of people are, multidisciplinary artists, but I think of myself as more than just the expression of an artist. Like there's more than just the visual side of it for me. It's the feeling and the sensation. Like a lot of times I'm orchestrating, a choreography of how people feel and connect to their experiences through my work, and so that's what I feel like a griot's manifestation is. So the newest evolution of my work has been, I won't necessarily say it's the newest, because I've done quite a few installations over the past, I guess, 10 or 15 years. But I've gotten some really fantastic opportunities to do public sculptures. And so these have been a really great opportunity to take and marry the idea of wearable sculptures with figurative pieces, with the historical narrative, and create these expressions that don't exist just in white boxes in galleries and museums or collectors' homes or whatever, or small scale, but to exist in the world. And so the first opportunity that I got to do one of these really large public sculptures, I kept thinking to myself, like, I don't think I really understood the idea of, I'm a fan of public sculptures, but for me, I didn't really could not understand the connection that I could make of these wearable pieces to these static pieces, if that makes sense. And so as I've gotten an opportunity to do more of them, the iterations of them, I think, draw closer and closer to the idea of time. And that was one of the things I think we remarked on earlier, like this idea of because really that's what my work is about, like the past, present, and future existing in the same. And so I have this, I know I'm rambling, so feel free.
This is great because as you're talking, I'm like, yes, when I was sitting with your work in preparation for this conversation, I was like, his work is so deeply connected to the past. And then there's definitely like this deep connection to the future. And I know for you, it's saying something to the now. And so I was so curious about your relationship with time and like what time means for you. And then how do you feel like this conversation with the past and then the future, what does it have to say to the now for you? Like, what is it communicating for you?
Yeah, no. So now that's a great way to package, I guess, what the work really is, I guess, from a total arc standpoint. For me, so like the present is always the now, like it's right now, it's right now, it's right now. At one point, this was the present, and now, now we're looking at the past 2 minutes ago, and then like it can become like this spider webbing of possibilities. But so I have this, I'm not going to even call it a theory. Like the work also has a spiritual connection. And so to me, I know, so your background is divinity. And so, or you have quite a bit of divinity, like kind of looped into your work and the things that you're working on also. And so for me, like I had this idea that God is the continuity of energy and the preservation of energy. And so the truest form of God is, how like in both in the Bible, but also in ancient scripts, it talks about the one God being like in everything. There's always a manifestation of him in different things. So he's in you and me and us and the grass and the trees and the things we create. And so to me, if that is true, if it's true for the physical standpoint, then that means also the omnipresence of God is in time. And so that also means the granted protection, but then also there's a spiritual encoding that is in all of us and it is in the work that we create as artists and as people that gets expressed out through the world. And so to me, going back to what I was saying earlier about, the connection between these wearable pieces that get activated through choreography and, for instance, Ancestor that's out there on the Heights right now, on Heights Boulevard, it has a connection. Even though Ancestor doesn't move, Ancestor does move, because Ancestor was yesterday and Ancestor is going to be tomorrow. Ancestor was right now. And does that make sense? And so, the spiritual presence of a great divine creator and architect and God exists in that way also. He does not have to move, or she does not have to move in order to be. It's just a continuity of energy. And so I know that sounds like outlandish and crazy, but like that is how I view the work. And so tagged into that narrative, so what has become of the narrative just out of the technological standpoint, Menagerie is the name of the character. He has become a time traveler. And so the last piece I did was called Time Traveling. And it was the resemblance of Menagerie as the past and Menagerie as the future. And so the figure was actually looking at to his left towards the street where he was located, but then he was also looking straight ahead, heading north. And so there's a great deal of this idea of traveling through time that is true for the work. But even from a cultural standpoint, that is us, right? Like that is people of color, that's Black people. Like we are having to, even embodied in something like the Sankofa bird. Like there is something about us who are ancient, that has like these multiple hooks into different time periods all at the same time. I'm gonna shut up there because I know I'm like just rambling and
no, it's brilliant, and I'm just like eating it up. Give me more. I do want to talk some about the materials that you use and your creative process. You seem to be really, like, even looking at your website, like the sculptures are labeled by the materials, like that page that leads you to the sculptures, like wood, metal, plastic, and it's concrete, 1, 2, Am I getting that right?
Concrete
Yeah.
is something I've played around with,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, like, why are you drawn to those materials? And then is there even a connection to the land? Like, what is your relationship to the land in your work? Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for seeing that. I mean, it's so funny because yeah, I forgot my website was said that. But material presence is something that is strong in my work. So the reason why I choose those materials is because I can evolve them. Like, they can be manipulated and they can look ancient and they can look modern. They can look like whatever I want them to look like. So oftentimes I always get the question, do you use recycled materials? And the answer is mainly no. I have in certain pieces, but like most of what you see they come from brand new pieces. Like, like the concrete and the wood pieces, all that stuff I make it look like it has a history. And I enjoy that process of like giving it a history, and giving it definition through material manipulation. And so there is a connection to the earth in the work. I used to, when I was in that period of not making work for the public, that's the reason why I named the business Eden's Tree, because it was the idea of paradise for me at the moment. And the truest manifestation of knowledge is in the tree of life, tree of knowledge, and this idea that you grow, into this knowledge. And so to me, I, when I choose materials, I choose things that they're not natural necessarily, other than the wood that I use, but they have the essence of being natural. Even in the oxidation that I use, for many years, I've been painting with oxidation because it's a living substance. Like the rust paintings that I've created, the image silhouettes of the mask, for anybody who has one of those in their homes, they'll probably say, when I bought this, it looked like this. And then 3 years later, it looks like this. That's a process that I explain to people, and they love that idea that the painting itself can change, or the 3-dimensional sculpture can change because of the surface quality of it.
It seems like your life to this moment has been so rich with the people, your family, like these stories that are a part of you, your friendships, the experiences that you've had, the work you've created that has enriched Houston and those who have engaged it. And I'm just really thankful for the artist that you are, and how you show up in this world. And I'm curious, looking back, right, at HSPVA, that student walking those halls and full of imagination and the world, like so many possibilities for yourself. What words of wisdom or life would you speak to the 16-year-old Anthony?
Yeah. Well, so I guess surprisingly, those words of wisdom, or maybe not surprisingly, so those words of wisdom would be twofold. So when I was 16, I was experiencing a large trauma that was going on in my family, and so I would encourage that young man to be confident in himself, and to just continue to strive to embody that which was not available to him, and so in that, I mean, this idea of like legacy, and like the idea of really being a umbrella for history, but in a very personal way, like the idea that, you can be whole in yourself without all the trappings that, a society assigns to like being necessarily whole. So that's one thing I would say, but also like, do not be afraid to be an artist and to allow yourself to evolve at whatever pace is comfortable for you. Because that was something that I think I struggled with even coming out of school. Like, with all the knowledge and the experiences that I had as an artist, I don't think I gave myself the credit and the allowance to evolve and to become the mature artist that I knew I could be, because I was busy trying to please someone else's vision of what type of artist I should be, and just really be who you are.
You mentioned legacy too. Do you think about legacy? And if you do, what is the legacy that you would like to leave as an artist?
Yeah, that is something that became, that word legacy has been a part of my practice as an artist for a long time now, and it became very real when I discovered, or when I realized that the work that I was doing was about history, was connected to history and the historical circumstances of my ancestors and the future circumstances of myself and generations that will come after me. And so to me, like, legacy to me embodies all that is not necessarily right, but all that is necessary for any culture and for any one person to exist. And so, just from a map standpoint, legacy is the map, like the idea that we come from somewhere and we're going somewhere. To me, like, the legacy that I want to leave is something that fits firmly in that continuity of energy. When we look at art history, there's always like, and not that I want to, necessarily, I want my expressions and the things that I do to live on, but I want the work that I do to change people's minds and hearts and to be affirming and genuine to people. I want that to be the thing that people really get out of the work, because from an art historical standpoint, that there are a lot of artists that have done like these monumental things, but they are flat, if you will. Like, there are expressions that are just made just for the sake of expression. It's like very kitsch. For me, I don't want my work to be just beautiful because it's beautiful aesthetically. I want it to be beautiful because I want people to look at it and say, oh my God, like, I see what they were doing, him or they, or who, the people that were connected to this movement that we're in right now. I believe that we're in an art movement, but I want the legacy to be something that survives time. And when it does arrive in the future, it's something that still informs the future, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
It makes total sense. And your work, and because your work embodies that, like, it's weaved all throughout the work that flows from your hands. And so, Anthony, thank you. Thank you for your time, for this conversation. And
thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.